It's LSU and Texas A&M, your final preview and score prediction. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well, so please subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We will get to your final score preview and prediction for LSU Texas A&M. Little injury news. Tigers could be getting a long-awaited weapon back, but we know that a very key member of the Texas A&M offense is not going to play against the Tigers. We'll explain why that's significant here in a smidge. But one storyline that has been sort of pervasive all this week is the two head coaches. It's Brian Kelly. It's Mike Elko. These two, of course, were colleagues for a season in South Bend when Brian Kelly hired Mike Elko to be his defensive coordinator. And they have both said very kind things about one another all throughout the week. Very obviously had a good working relationship. Mike Elko went to Penn, Pennsylvania, UPenn, where he was a safety, coached in the Ivy League as well. Penn, Fordham, then to Richmond Hofstra before landing at Bowling Green as the defensive coordinator, and then Wake Forest, which is where he became acquainted with Brian Kelly, who hired Mike Elko in 2017 to be his defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. And after just one season in South Bend, Elko left for Texas A&M to be the defensive coordinator, where he spent 4 seasons, then became the head coach at Duke, and then back to Texas A&M, as we well know. And Mike Elko has Texas A&M playing in what many in College Station are calling the most meaningful game since A&M's been in the SEC. And when you think about it, aside from the 9-1 season they had in the COVID year where they played in the Orange Bowl, it probably makes sense because this isn't a knock, but Texas A&M hasn't played in a whole lot of meaningful games. Aside from that COVID year, you have the Johnny Manziel season where they won 10 games back in 2012, but that was it. So the fact that you're here near the end of October playing in a game of undefeated teams in the SEC, you got a top 10 opponent coming into College Station that has put together a really nice rivalry with Texas A&M. Yes, I understand why there's a lot of excitement in College Station about this game. And specifically with the two coaches, I think it's very natural to ask who might have an edge. Might there be an edge because of the familiarity? And something Brian Kelly said on Thursday when he met with reporters is not really. The things that look familiar are the back end, and it makes sense, right? Because Mike Elko was a safety by trade. He was a safeties coach, and so a lot of what Mike Elko wants to do at the back of a defense is going to look like what Mike Elko wants to do. But Brian Kelly was also quick to point out that he's matching his secondary to his front seven and the personnel he had, and he didn't necessarily have that personnel at Notre Dame. And of course, that defensive front for Texas A&M is quite good. Defensive front we talked about on the previous episode, so I'd highly recommend you go check that out. But my contention is and will continue to be that regardless of who's coaching them, LSU's offensive line has just been better than everyone they faced this year. And I think it'll be no different on Saturday. And if someone's going to beat them, you'll tip your cap to them, but I got to see it to believe it. But in the meantime, I don't know that you give a real edge because of the familiarity. I think you give an edge because of the experience. And sometimes when you look at a coaching matchup or a matchup that many might think is even, I tend to look at 3 pieces of criteria. I look at the coach, the quarterback, and the venue. Well, Brian Kelly is the winningest active coach in college football. As a head coach, Mike Elko is 22-10. He's been good, but this is only his 3rd season as a head football coach. Brian Kelly's in his 33rd season as a head football coach. The edge goes to Brian Kelly. There's just nothing he hasn't seen yet. When it comes to quarterback, the very obvious edge is also to LSU. Garrett Nussmeier being a 4th-year player who has been unflappable. Connor Wigman so far has been anything but. He's been more of a liability, more turnovers than touchdowns this year. He's only played in 4 games. He's battled through injury as well. And he threw 4 turnover-worthy passes last week against Mississippi State, including 2 that were intercepted, and all 4 were against a clean pocket, as we've detailed. You have a huge edge at the head coaching position and at quarterback. Of course, the venue benefits Texas A&M. Spot on the schedule benefits Texas A&M, or does it? We'll get to that in just a bit. But as LSU inches closer to this game, and we did get an injury report, Brian Kelly updated status of Chris Hilton. And I know, at this point, the Chris Hilton conversation, it must almost feel just like Chris Hilton's a unicorn. You'll see him. Does he really exist? We'll see him when we do. My contention has been that, look, you proceed as if you're not going to have Chris Hilton. And when he shows up, awesome. It'll be a great benefit to this team. But Brian Kelly was asked about Chris Hilton on Thursday. Here's what he said.
Chris Hilton practiced today.
To what capacity?
Let me get my crystal ball. He was in full capacity. Yep.
So Chris Hilton practiced fully. He was pressed and followed up with this.
He's made progress. This has been a slow process for us and him. We want to be, I think, more than anything else, you don't bring a wide receiver back after this long out unless he's properly conditioned, because then you go pull a hamstring, right? It's not the leg anymore. And we're not concerned, and he's not concerned about the leg. This is much more about a conditioning element relative to soft tissue more than anything else. So, we think we're in a pretty good position here. Now this is just getting him, game ready.
What can he give you? If he does run out there this week against Texas A&M, remember Chris Hilton was not dressed last week at Arkansas. Is he in a position where he's ready to get on the field and go contribute? If he is, that adds a completely different layer and dimension to your offense. But again, we've talked about it enough. There's nothing else to say. We know what Chris Hilton is, what he can give to your offense. He can give you that stretch the field dynamic that you currently don't have. You would love to see it if it shows up. If it doesn't, well, then it's no different than any of the previous 7 games. I want it for Chris. I want him to be out there. He makes LSU better when he's on the field. If he's out there Saturday against Texas A&M, awesome. I hope he does great and makes a ton of plays. But if he's not, then you go and function as you have the entire season without him. So I can kind of understand Brian Kelly's tongue-in-cheek answer about looking into the crystal ball. But the second part of that is also true. Chris will help whenever he's there, but it's just a matter of getting him there at this point. I don't think we would say there's no need to rush it because he hasn't been rushed. It's been a hot minute since that final Saturday of fall camp when Chris was injured. But here we still remain waiting to see when he'll make his debut. Maybe it'll be Saturday against Texas A&M at Kyle Field. One player that we know will not be there in uniform is a very key member of the Texas A&M offense. And I want to tell you why it's so important next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Get to tell you today about Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. So here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. So just remember, make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Look, every time you drink pre-alcohol before you drinks, you should notice a difference. Even after a night out, you can definitely plan on feeling good the next day. Remember, it's this easy. Drink your pre-alcohol. That's your first step. Step 2, drink responsibly, pace yourself, hydrate, get a good night's sleep. And then step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. So here's what you do. Go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use the code lockedoncollege at checkout for 15% off. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Man, very cool to be able to tell you about Prize Picks, the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on the latest 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Your game all season. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. So win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get in on the sports action in more than 30 states here in Louisiana, but also California, Florida, Georgia, Texas, wherever you may be. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts selected player projections up to 25% to provide even more value to your lineup. So download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 off instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first lineup. That's at Prize Picks. So download Prize Picks today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege. Chase Basantis is going to miss the LSU Texas A&M game on Saturday. He's officially been ruled out. Now, I want to talk a little bit about why this is impactful, but I'll start by telling you who Chase Basantis is if you're not familiar. So go back to his recruitment. I'm not going to bore you with a ton of details here, but go back to his recruitment. Chase Basantis was a consensus 4-star. He was the number 1 player out of the state of New Jersey. He was the number 46 overall player in the country and the number 2 interior offensive lineman. So again, this was a guy 2 years ago that was the number 46 overall player in the country, any position. He was a top 50 player nationally. Great talent. Everybody recruited him, including LSU. He signed with A&M, and as a true freshman a year ago, ended up starting all 13 games at right tackle. This year, as a sophomore, Basantis moved to left guard. Remember, he signed as an interior offensive lineman. So he had started every game to this point, and Saturday against Mississippi State suffered a leg injury, limped to the locker room, and is out against LSU. Now, I want to be clear. I am not cheering for or happy about a player being injured. I never want anybody to be hurt. That sucks. This is real life with real people, and those are people. Maybe I'm just soft as a dad, but like those are people's children, and you want good things for all these young guys. However, it is something you have to address because it is something significant in the context of this game. Because Texas A&M is one of the best rushing offenses in the NFL. In college football. The Aggies are 12th nationally in rushing offense at 216 yards per game. This is what they do. They line up behind their offensive line, and they run a guy like Le'Veon Moss, who's from Baton Rouge, went to Estruma, and that is where they thrive. You take Chase Basantis out, he is going to be replaced by a true freshman at left guard. That is a really unenviable task for a true freshman to step in. I'm not saying this means LSU is going to dominate the line of scrimmage. What is obvious, though, is you took a very talented, very experienced 6'6", 320-pound lineman off the field, and you're replacing him with a true freshman. That is an advantage to LSU in the interior on that side of the ball as a result. It's also worth noting that this matchup, to me, is the biggest matchup of this football game. We can talk about anything we want. We can talk about the quarterbacks. Yes, I think the quarterbacks are significant, but the quarterbacks don't face each other. I am looking at the Texas A&M rush offense and the LSU rush defense because I think that's the game. I think if there's a place on paper where A&M might have or perceive to have an edge, it's their ability to run the football, and LSU, which has been susceptible this year to big plays in the running game. We all know the story. You gave up 75 and 66-yard touchdown runs to South Carolina. Colin Guggenheim had a 67-yard touchdown run. Ulysses Bentley had a 50-yard touchdown run. We know the drill. However, last week, LSU went to Fayetteville and took on an Arkansas team that was averaging 199 rush yards per game, and LSU held them to 38. And I don't care what type of context you want to throw out. Well, sack yards factors in. Yeah, as it does for every team, including Arkansas up until that point in the year. Yeah, well, Taylon Green was coming off of injury. Or you could look at Jaquindon Jackson, the running back, who was hurt in the second half. And those things are true. Those are absolutely true. But I could also point to Texas A&M, who has faced, had a backup quarterback for 3 weeks and faced backup quarterbacks in 2 of their impactful games earlier this year. Nice win against Arkansas, against the backup quarterback. So I don't know that I'm going to give any caveat there other than LSU's run defense has been playing much better, especially since they seem to have found their alignment, found a rotation on the interior of the defensive line. And Texas A&M, which wants to run the football, is very good at it, is a team that just lost one of its best players on the interior. And if you want to look at how to make Texas A&M impotent offensively, stop them from running the football and make Connor Wigman beat you. Because Connor Wigman has been bad this year. He missed 3 games due to injury, but he's played in 4. The first game of the season against Notre Dame, he had 13 completions for 100 yards. He was awful. He's played 1 really good game this year, and it was against Missouri. He threw for over 200 yards in that game. He was very efficient, did not throw a touchdown, did not throw an interception, and A&M hit some big plays in that game. But Missouri has been sort of hapless and lifeless throughout this season. But that was the one game where Wegman played within himself and played well. But again, that's the outlier at this point for Connor Wegman. So for me, I look at LSU and say, your path in this game, your path to win, stop Missouri from running the ball and make Connor Wigman throw to beat you, because I'm not so sure that he can. And the other big significant piece here is that I don't think A&M has those great players on the outside like we've seen in the past that are capable of beating the LSU secondary. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but I do believe if you wake up on Sunday and A&M won the game, you'll open up the box score and you'll look directly at Texas A&M's rushing yardage total, and that will tell you the story. If A&M is able to run the football effectively and base what they do offensively off of the run, it will be a tough day for LSU. If the LSU run defense that showed up in Fayetteville shows up in College Station and LSU manages to limit that Texas A&M rushing offense, then I think LSU is going to have a happy flight home, and the Tigers will win that game on the road. By the way, here's what Brian Kelly said Thursday about Le'Veon Moss, about the Texas A&M offensive line, their ability to run the football.
We're respectful of their offensive line. We think they've got a really good offensive line. They've got good schemes. The backs run hard. But we feel like what we do defensively is really sound and fundamental, and we just need to continue to be who we have been and not be susceptible to doing things like we did earlier in the year, which is not do our jobs, be 1/11th of the group. And I think that the guys have settled into, really more than anything else, trusting the guy next to him. Like, I don't have to do his job. That's not my job. And we had a lot of guys doing that earlier in the year where they were trying to do, well, I'll do his job too. You know what? That's not a good thing, because now you're leaving something open. So really good offensive line, really good running game. The back is sturdy and physical. We got to be who we are over the last few weeks. And if we do that, we feel like this is going to be a heck of a game.
Heck of a game, and one that LSU will have a great chance of winning. I want to throw out one more tidbit and my final preview and prediction when we continue and wrap up here. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Hey, earlier this week, LSU was getting a field goal. We saw on Thursday that number dropped to a pick'em. You can keep watching that line move throughout the day if it does, or you could choose to jump in on the Tigers now, whatever you want to do, but you can do it at FanDuel. Again, get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com, FanDuel.com. As we wrap up the show, I look at LSU and Texas A&M, and we just mentioned there, talking about FanDuel. When this game opened, LSU was a field goal underdog. It makes sense. Neutral field, probably an even match. It's at Texas A&M. They get a field goal for that, so A&M's a 3-point favorite. When you see the line go to a pick'em, that effectively tells you that if this were played on a neutral field, LSU would be favored, and certainly they'd be favored in Tiger Stadium. And by the way, the public isn't going to move that line. That's sharp money. That's professional bettors that are coming in, putting big money on LSU that's moving that line. So what do they know? I think what they know is that LSU is better than Texas A&M, definitively. I was looking at this game, and I was trying to think, where does Texas A&M have an edge? Where are they? Which matchup are they better? We talked about the LSU offensive line against A&M's defensive front seven, and they've been a very good defensive front seven. I'm not suggesting they aren't. But nobody has gotten home against LSU. Look, the team that had the most success pressuring Garrett Nussmeier was South Carolina, and LSU moved the ball at will against them in the second half of that football game and scored 36 points. So I like LSU there. You flip it around. I think Texas A&M's offensive line and run game is really good, but we just talked about it. You lose Chase Basantis. LSU's run defense has been really good. You want to look out on the perimeter? Mike Elko by trade is a safety, so he's a defensive backs guy, and he's got his guys playing really well. They don't have enough guys to cover all of LSU's guys. And on the other side, Texas A&M just doesn't have the star receivers that I think will give LSU trouble. Look, I'm still not sure LSU is going to be really good in coverage, and there's going to be teams that give them problems, like Trey Harris from Ole Miss, like Ryan Williams from Alabama. Those guys are going to be a problem for LSU because they don't have a Derek Stingley, someone that can go lock down a really great player like that. Now, teams have done it. Vanderbilt did it. So how do you imitate or mimic what Vanderbilt did? Well, that's going to be LSU's challenge whenever they play Alabama. But in the meantime, Evan Stewart's at Oregon. Moose Muhammad's on the team, but he's not playing. I mean, Texas A&M, their leading receiver is Noah Thomas with 21 catches for 289. They're just not explosive in the pass game, and Connor Wegman has struggled. So I don't know, as I look on the field, where I would give a distinct edge to Texas A&M. I think LSU flatly is just better. I also look at the competition. Here's the offenses that Texas A&M has faced so far this year, where they rank. Notre Dame is 63rd nationally. They played McNeese, which is an FCS school, so they don't rank. Florida, 51st. Bowling Green, 85th. Arkansas, 23rd. Missouri, 47th. Mississippi State, 77th. The best offense that Texas A&M has faced so far this year is Arkansas, 23rd in the country. And they played Arkansas earlier in this season when they had in that game in Arlington, and they played them with Marcel Reed in a game where A&M ran the ball, try to limit it. I just don't know that I look at a spot where A&M is definitively better. So I'll tell you, with this game, I kind of feel an inverse of what I felt about Ole Miss. Here's what I mean. before the season started, we're at media days and we do the whole season prediction thing and everything. And I picked LSU to beat Ole Miss and to lose to Texas A&M. That was my preseason pick. Had LSU 10-2. Now I had them beating Southern Cal. But I also had them beating Ole Miss, but had them losing to A&M. And the reason was the spot. For all the things we talked about with Ole Miss, 7 consecutive games, 3 consecutive conference games, back-to-back road conference games, LSU coming off a bye, all that stuff. Now we got to the game week, and I picked Ole Miss because up until that point, I think Ole Miss had been better than LSU. They're more talented, and they'd played better. They had the hiccup against Kentucky, but overall, a more talented and better team than we had seen LSU play. LSU was not good for a month. They were not good for a month. But I think now we know as we've come through that, they were feeling their way. They were rotating a lot of guys, playing a lot of guys, because I think they knew they weren't going to lose any of those games. They felt they weren't going to lose any of those games. So they played a lot of guys to see who they had and who they could trust and all that good stuff. It was sort of a trial by fire. And they got into the Ole Miss game with 10 days to prepare, and they said, these are the guys we're rolling with, and it worked. And it worked again at Arkansas, and I think they're getting better. So while at that time, I don't think you could give LSU the benefit of the doubt, I think what we have seen now is a team that very clearly has improved. And I also look at a Texas A&M team that the best offense they faced was Arkansas, 23rd in the country. By a mile, this will be the best offense that Arkansas faces, or excuse me, that Texas A&M faces this year when they take on LSU. And LSU's battle-tested on the road as well. So while I don't like the spot, I don't like LSU back-to-back road conference games. I also think in the same way I did a couple of weeks ago when I picked Ole Miss because I thought they were better, I'm going to pick LSU because I think they're just better. And like I said earlier, whenever I'm a little torn, I look at coach, quarterback, and venue. And LSU checks 3 of those boxes. They got the better coach. They got the dramatically better quarterback. They do have to play at Kyle Field, which I think will be a really tough place to go play. But the other thing is what I just mentioned. LSU struggles in winning back-to-back road conference games. It's just not an easy thing to do. Not something LSU has done a lot of over the years. We just saw Ole Miss struggle to do it. They won at South Carolina, had to come to Baton Rouge, and lost in Baton Rouge. It is hard to win back-to-back road conference games. But my buddy Chris Marler, who works with us over at LouisianaSports.net, is our SEC writer, sent me this. He has a piece that goes up every Friday called Numbers to Know. It's basically interesting stats about all the games in the SEC for a given weekend. And he sent me this one. 77.8. That's the number. Brian Kelly in his college career is 14-3-1 against the spread, for a winning percentage of 77.8 on a road trip, the second consecutive game or more on the road, where his team is on normal rest or less, so 7 days. Basically, when Brian Kelly in his career has had back-to-back road games, and they're on normal rest, 7 days or more, back-to-back road games, he's 14-3-1 against the spread in that second game. The last time he lost was in 2006 while he was at Central Michigan. You have a massive advantage with the head coach, who is going to make sure his team is ready regardless of situation. I think LSU's playing better. I think they're the better team. They have the better coach, the better quarterback. I think they're better all over the field. LSU hasn't won at Kyle Field since 2016. I think that changes on Saturday night. LSU, I think, beats Texas A&M 30-24. The Tigers move to 7-1 heading into their bye, setting up a massive showdown with Alabama in Baton Rouge 2 weeks from Saturday. Give me the Tigers 30-24 to beat Texas A&M. All right, that'll do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On LSU. Hey, if you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.